and transmit data
That's
back.
an anal probe.
Okay, stop. We got to start this again because there's already an anal probe joke in here.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
All right, from the top.
Warning, this podcast contains violence, sexuality, gore, and other horrible and disturbing things. Listener discretion is advised. Also, the hosts of this venture are ignorant dipshits, so please do not take anything they say as fact. And enjoy the show.
Now, are you sitting comfortably? Good. Then we'll begin.
Today we had 15 homicides and 63 violent crimes, as if that's the way it's supposed to be.
The atoms in your left hand probably came from a different star than your right hand.
It is our basic human right to be forgotten.
A second plane now has crashed into the other tower of the World Trade Center.
Putting chemicals in the water that turn the friggin' frogs gay.
The defendant shall be incarcerated for the rest of her natural life with no possibility of parole.
You are not machines. You are not cattle. You are men.
We were somewhere around Barstow, on the edge of the desert, when the drugs began to take hold.
Occultae Veritatis.
Hello, occultists, and welcome back to Occultae Veritatis podcast. My name is Leon Filger, along with
Sageberry.
Ood Gallifrey.
And in studio with us,
Kaylin.
And
Richard Bigley.
A space probe is an unmanned spacecraft designed to explore the solar system and transmit data back to Earth. Not to be confused with an anal probe, which explores Richard Bigley's colon and transmit data back to his cat, Jenny.
Oh, Jenny.
On September 5th, 1977, a space probe called Voyager 1 was launched. More than 41 years later, it has penetrated the heliopause and entered interstellar space. Space probes are nifty, so let's get drunk. It's time for What's Your Poison?
So, what's your poison?
And this is Belly Flop Apricot from Big Rock Brewery.
Yeah, so this is Big Flop Belly. Yeah, it's apricot flavored something.
Apricot flavored beer. Does an apricot taste like a nectarine? Is
Yes,
that kind of what
it does.
That's good.
Vaguely peachish, vaguely plumish.
Okay.
And depending on where you are in the States, they say apricot.
I say apricot.
Really?
I'm annoying, yeah. I also say syrup.
That's fine.
Boo.
When you say it like syrup, it sounds stupid.
It's like
syrup.
It's the same way that people say milk with an E in it, like milk instead of milk.
Yeah,
Malk.
I don't drink that shit.
Or pillow instead of pillow. Or celery instead of celery.
Roof instead of roof.
Yeah.
Or
Controversy instead of controversy.
You wait, we're going to get emails of people pointing out shit we say wrong. So.
Yeah. That's fair.
It's the Canadian accent.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to rate this 77 Kuiper Belt objects out of a series, the rest of the asteroid belt, Phobos and Deimos, which are Mars' two moons, Charon, which is Pluto's moon, and some apricots and sperm whale out of 1.
Once again, 500 patrons, we will release that conversion chart. That's going to take a lot of work.
No, it's pretty good. Like I could drink it and get drunk on it pretty quick. I think.
It's nice. I wanted to make a slightly sweet version of a grisette you'd love to drink during the summer. We bought in a special spelt malt from Europe and blended an apricot to put on our twist in the style.
They've got a chart on the side. Its color is light. Its flavor is somewhere between malt and hops. And the IBU, I don't know what the fuck that means. Bigley?
International Bitterness Unit, I think.
Is just slightly right of 0, nowhere near 100.
I wish
it says 18 on my can.
Yeah.
So 18 IBU. It's like an actual standardized unit, I think.
Yeah.
Smart you. Look at that.
I wish they would put information like that on more cans. I think I would always go for low bitter.
For those winos out there, it's like a crisp, clean white wine.
Yeah.
I have had so much white wine in the last 3 days. I ran out of red wine, and then I ran out of beer, and then I ran out of milk stout, which isn't actually beer, it's shit. Drank all of that, and I had to crack a bottle of white wine.
That was the one I rated like 8 out of 10. I really like that one.
That milk stout?
Yeah.
Me and Bigley've got a buddy who came over to a Risk tournament at my place and left behind 2 cans of milk stout, which then I had to drink in desperation. In retrospect, they weren't as bad as I remembered them being the first time I had a milk stout, but definitely barely edible.
I'm going to go with what Kaylin says And kind of agree with the wine, white wine thing, kind of like an apricot wine, if you will. It's not really a beer of any sort. It's
it's not beer. It's not beer.
It's grisette. Let's Google what a grisette beer is supposed to be like.
It's beer with apricot juice. It says right on the bottom.
It's probably like wheat beer or something, I would imagine.
Yeah, like what kind of beer is it prior to the apricot?
Oh, that's a good question.
It's only classified as a beer because it's made with grains and hops.
Oh, yeah.
I'll be damned.
Light, refreshing European-born beers. Oh, I don't want percent.
I think I'll give this a 10 out of 10. I can probably drink a lot of it.
Holy shit, son. 10 out of 10.
I'm really enthusiastic about this. I think I'm going to have to pick some up for myself
Don't
later.
get your fucking dick caught in the can.
Oh, my.
It pairs very well with the Hall's lozenge that I was sucking on earlier.
That's what she said. I will give it like an 8 out of 10. This is really nice. It's not very high in alcohol. Like it's only 3.9%.
Oh,
but it's good.
I'm going to give it a 6 just because like it feels like two things mashed together and they work okay. But
I would argue it is two things mashed together. You're right on.
Oh, yeah. But like, I think I would enjoy them more separately than together. I think.
You take a shot and take a bite of apricot?
Oh, yeah. That sounds like a nice afternoon, actually.
Let's do that sometime.
That sounds like a nice afternoon.
I would drink this, I guess, on a hot summer day, like sitting around getting a good tan.
Not when it's wind chill minus 19 today?
No, probably not. Well, I mean, wind chill minus 19, I'll drink any day. But specifically in the summer, I would drink this in my backyard, getting a nice tan, if I don't have a bottle of wine.
On October the 4th, 1957, while the Americans were still finalizing their plans, Sputnik was launched.
Then its casing opened. The springs snapped, and the nose cone was pushed out of the way. A ball with 4 antennae emerged to go it alone in the darkness of space. And a radio began to send a signal back to Earth. Humanity had entered the space age. When Sputnik left its Russian home, it began an incredibly fast journey west across the Mediterranean, passing over Jerusalem. Then it sailed over Africa and the Sahara Desert. Then over the wide southern Atlantic Ocean and across vast Antarctica. Then up over Mexico. And then it entered America, passing right over Houston.
This is Radio Moscow, and here is the news.
Our satellite Sputnik lifted at 22 hours 28 minutes Moscow time and entered orbit around the Earth.
The first artificial Earth satellites in the world have now been created. This first satellite
As I said in the opening, space probes are robotic, computerized spaceships that cruise around the solar system, looking at cool shit and sending photos and data back to Earth so we can put super high-resolution images of Saturn's moons in space-themed day planners. Space probes have visited all 8 planets, plus Pluto, and in August of 2014, the surface of a motherfucking comet.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
There are 111 space probes currently zipping around the solar system, and 5 of them, Voyagers 1 and 2, Pioneers 10 and 11, and New Horizons, that have left the solar system entirely.
And, like, this is something made by, like, I just got into, like, human evolution, and, like, literally about 1,200 generations ago, we started building buildings. That's it. And now we're launching things that are going beyond our solar system.
That's wild.
Not bad for a bunch of primates.
It was 9 years from the time Sputnik went up till Neil Armstrong set foot on the moon. 9 years.
Holy shit. Can you imagine if we had that kind of get up and go today?
Do you know how much I've failed in the last 9 years?
Yeah.
Oh, me too.
But I mean,
that's when you watch reality television and you bring that expectation way back down.
That's fair. But I mean, at the time, NASA's budget was like 5% of the overall national budget. It's now down to like 0.5.
Yeah.
So if they jack the money up, and again, we could be back on the moon. We could be in Mars in 12 years.
No, easily. Like if we had the same kind of drive we did in the 1960s, like I can't even imagine how far we could go with today's technology.
The problem isn't so much our drive; it's the Russians' lack of drive. Because without the competition, without the competitive spirit, there's not really a whole lot of. What's the point in going to the moon, really?
Yeah.
How does that help?
Yeah.
I mean, we're going to mine shit there? No, we're not. We're not fucking mining on the moon. We'll be destroyed by then.
Yeah. You have to give it a good dick measuring contest is a good way to like energize a populace. Like if Russia said we're going to colonize Mars, you better believe that everybody would be getting on board.
Yeah, and I mean, like a common question about space probes is why we have them at all. And the answer is twofold. First, space is really cool, and understanding our place within it helps us better understand our place on the planet. And two, a pissing competition with the Russians.
Yeah.
Yes.
The first space probes, or rather the first successful ones, were the Pioneer series, launched by the United States. This group consisted of 6 probes, 5 of which were successful, and 1 of which, Pioneer E, exploded on its way to orbit. The successful Pioneers were launched between March 1960 and November 1968. And the purpose of the Pioneer program was to explore the solar system. The probes carried sensors to measure solar winds and magnetic fields. The last 2 Pioneers, numbers 10 and 11, explored the outer planets and then left the solar system. Both of them carry a golden plaque depicting a man and a woman naked, information about the origin of the creators and probes, and some other nice shit, picture of the spaceship and whatnot, should any extraterrestrials ever find them.
On March 3, 1972, Pioneer 10 was launched to explore the solar system and beyond. Engraved upon a gold anodized aluminum plaque, bolted to its antenna support, was quite possibly the most ambitious piece of visual communication ever conceived. The plaque was designed by Frank Drake and Carl Sagan, with artwork by Linda Salzman Sagan, to serve as a galactic greeting card, communicating when and where Pioneer was launched, and by what kind of beings to alien life forms who might someday encounter it.
But in the remote contingency that there are interstellar spacefaring societies which might someday pick up this derelict no longer radioing, we thought we would put a message on it to indicate a little bit of where we are, when we are, and who we are.
Just sending unsolicited nudes to extraterrestrials.
Dick pics.
Well, everybody needs a good probe.
Yeah. I actually want to get a tattoo of that image.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. And I heard those probes also have like a full like record player on board, just in case they don't have the equipment to play it there.
Yeah, it's people saying hi in like every language.
Yeah.
Because we need every language.
Every language.
Hi, hello.
So basically, it's a mixtape, unsolicited nudes, and directions back to our place.
Yeah.
Basically, yeah.
So it's a bad pickup line.
And also a Madonna B track, from what I hear.
Madonna, really?
Mm-hmm.
We only send our best.
You could probably insert some of the samples from the record in this section here.
In fact, I'll do that right now.
Voyager's passage by Jupiter accelerated it towards a close encounter with the planet Saturn. Saturn's gravity will propel it on to Uranus. And in this game of cosmic billiards after Uranus, it will plunge on past Neptune, leaving the solar system and becoming an interstellar spacecraft, destined to wander forever the great ocean between the stars. And if Voyager should, sometime in its distant future, encounter beings from some other civilization in space, it bears a message, a phonograph record, golden, delicate, with instructions for use. And on this record are a sampling of pictures, sounds, greetings, and an hour and a half of exquisite music, the Earth's greatest hits. A gift across the cosmic ocean from one island civilization to another. The record bears, in English, an additional little handwritten greeting. It says, "To the makers of music, all worlds, all times."
The earlier Pioneers were used to test escape velocity, which is the speed at which a spacecraft must be traveling in order to leave the grasp of Earth's gravity, something that had never been done successfully before the Pioneer program. Pioneers 3 and 4 were used to test lunar orbital insertion in advance of the Apollo program manned lunar landings. Overall, the Pioneer program was successful and paved the way for future, more complex space probes.
Because everybody likes a good complex probe.
Oh, yeah. It's all about
you
multiple
kind
moving
of
parts.
caught me on that whole lunar orbit insertion part, though.
Okay,
I'm sorry, this whole podcast is just going to be like low-hanging fruit jokes.
And a lunar orbit insertion is swinging around the moon and using the gravity of the moon to slingshot at high speeds into the outer solar system.
Okay. So it says musically, the bulk of the disc is comprised of European classical and world music with just 3 songs from Western culture. Chuck Berry's Johnny Be Good, Melancholy Blues by Louis Armstrong, and the blues standard Dark Was the Night.
Oh, I was wrong. Okay. Okay.
I've gone through the list of several hundred space probes that have done their thing. Some are active, some are not. Some have crashed into things, some have not. But I've highlighted about 10% of them, the most interesting 10%. And they begin with the Mercury probes. And as I had said earlier, every single planet around the solar system has been probed at one time or another.
And I would just like to acknowledge my maturity at not giggling every time you say probe, because it's really hard. That's what she said.
Okay, and a probing could involve direct contact or a flyby. And
I'm imagining a crossbow that shoots dildos.
And there may be orbital ejection at the time. Mariner 10 was launched on the 29th of March, 1974. It did a flyby of Mercury at a minimum distance of 704 kilometers, which is pretty fucking close.
Yeah.
That's very, very close.
Oh, yeah.
Then Messenger, which was launched in January of 2008, did a flyby of Mercury at a minimum distance of 200 kilometers. So
That's really close.
Got a bit closer. It's also very hot around Mercury, so things that get any closer to the sun from there melt.
And they were pointing their cameras down trying to get shots of the surface. Right?
Exactly, yeah.
Oh, yeah. It's hard to get a good shot when you're whipping by at like tens of thousands of kilometers an hour.
Well, I mean, it's like flyby probing. It's difficult.
Yeah.
Okay, so the next up are the Venus probes, and honestly, there's like 20 of them, and I've circled 4 of them.
Mm-hmm.
So the first one was Mariner 2, which was launched in December of 1962. It did a flyby, and it was the first successful flyby of Venus at 34,773 kilometers. Venus is an interesting dog to have to fly to because although Mercury is closer to the sun than Venus, Venus has got an incredibly dense atmosphere, and so the conditions on the surface are completely inhospitable to life and probes. We've landed a couple probes there. They've only broadcast for a half an hour before they've been melted and crushed.
Oh, yeah. Like Venus is at will happily melt lead levels.
Oh, yeah. It's very hot and miserable. There are lakes of molten methane, which is scary.
And it rains exotic, like acidic diamonds as well, I believe. Like
cool.
Like solidified diamonds that upon hitting the surface break and remelt and all that.
Venus, Earth's evil twin. It's clouds made of battery acid. At 900 degrees, its surface hot enough to melt lead.
Venus is pretty much like the biblical vision of hell today.
This may be the most hostile real estate in the solar system.
Yeah. So after Mariner 2, which was the earliest NASA attempt to actually make a landing, 20 more probes came up, all of them from the USSR, including one called Venera 4, which went up on the 18th of October, 1967. It had an atmospheric probe. And it got really close into probing Venus and got probed in to an altitude of 25 kilometers. And it continued to transmit until the end of its probing when it lost contact.
I'm glad that even when it went as deep as possible, it came through.
Exactly.
Did.
Then in 1970, the Soviets sent up another probe to Venus. It was called Venera 7, and it was the first successful landing on another planet. And it passed signals back to Earth for 23 minutes before it was melted.
23 minutes. I mean, it's better than the 2-pump jump before. So.
It's pretty impressive. And they took like a picture of Venus, but there's not much to see there because it's dark on the surface because there's just so much atmosphere.
I'm glad my Venus has never been probed.
But yeah, the pictures I have seen that have been colorized and like corrected to look appealing to, like, it looks like what my priest told me hell looked like when I was a little Christian boy and all that. Just like storming clouds of acid, and it's raining acid and just fire everywhere, and you're gonna melt and burn and all that shit.
So that's where we go when the nuns tell us we're going to hell.
Oh,
it's
yeah.
actually Venus.
It's actually Venus.
I'm all right with that.
I mean, I wouldn't last long there, so it's not like you would have a rough time on Venus.
Oh yeah.
Anywho, the next big one was Mariner 10, which launched on the 5th of February, 1974. It did a successful flyby of Venus, and this is the important bit. This is where shit changed completely, where we went from like escape velocity probes to slingshot velocity probes. Because as it stands, or rather as it stood prior to Mariner 10, we could only put a probe on the end of a really big rocket, fire it up as quick as we possibly can, and the speed at which the rocket was traveling upon exiting Earth's gravity was the greatest speed at which the probe could travel.
Yeah.
It could not go any faster than that because it was going in one straight line towards something.
And it, like, if you want a metaphor to kind of figure that out, like imagine somebody trying to escape a racetrack, like tied to a parachute. Like you've seen like athletes do that kind of training. Like escaping Earth's gravity is a lot like that. It doesn't have a lot of energy by the time it escapes like Earth's bond.
Yeah, I mean, escape velocity requires many, many times more thrust than orbital velocity, or even like lunar insertion. Or lunar insertion. Anyway, so Mariner 10 was big because it was the first time we ever used something called slingshotting.
Yeah.
And in this particular case, it was slingshotted around slingshotted.
I think it's slingshot.
Slingshot.
It all sounds weird. I don't know.
I'm going to say slingshotted until I'm corrected. Slingshotted around Mercury, which increased its velocity, which got it to Venus even faster. And it was the first time we did it.
Past tense is slingshotted.
Sweet, slingshotted. I win.
Yeah, and slingshotting is kind of like double bouncing on a trampoline, except 3D.
Yeah, exactly that. If you can imagine a giant wooden circle, say like a barrel, and stretched over the open end of that barrel is a chunk of fabric, stretchy fabric, some kind of like stretchy, like nylon material. And in the middle of that fabric, you place a golf ball. Now fire a marble toward that golf ball directly. It hits the golf ball and stops dead. That's what happens without orbital slingshotting. However, if you now roll that marble to the middle and it misses the major object, the golf ball in the middle, its velocity will increase as it zips around the backside of that celestial body or golf ball. And so it's allowed probes like the Pioneers and Vikings to slingshot around several planets as they go through the solar system, increasing their velocity with each turn around the celestial body. So you can get them traveling many times faster than a single rocket would get them traveling.
Cool.
And the first time we did this was Mariner 10.
Nice. What year was that in?
That was 1974.
Cool.
And the math involved in doing this, so if you want to pick up the right amount of energy at the right speed and then leave at the right angle, I once heard it described that it has to be about 10,000 times more accurate than a bullseye on a 50-yard shooting range.
Wow. Yes, that makes sense.
It's pretty tight.
Yeah.
So the next space probe of note is Galileo, which was launched on the 10th of February, 1990. And it used gravity assist en route to Jupiter, and it was the first one to get really close. It was 16,000 kilometers above Jupiter, which, if you think of Jupiter as being the size of Earth, that 16,000 kilometers is the height of a commercial airliner on Earth. So that's really, really fucking close to Jupiter by scale. Yeah.
Never even thought of that.
Yeah, it's pretty tight. The next probe was Cassini, which was launched in 98 and arrived at Saturn in 99. Also used gravity assist from a few of the inner planets to get there really, really quickly. And then, of course, Cassini was the famous probe that went into orbit around Saturn and took all the beautiful pictures of Saturn's rings and discovered a bunch of new mini planets in the rings and really sort of revolutionized the way we viewed that particular planet.
Yeah, because we thought it was just a bunch of crushed ice, but there's all kinds of like different paths, and like there's groups of giant ice boulders the size of houses that group together, and there's like spaces in the rings where little moons have formed.
NASA has taken data gathered by Cassini's spacecraft during its dive between Saturn and its rings on April 26th and converted it into audio files. The agency says the gap between the planet and its rings appears to be relatively dust-free, or the big empty as noted by Cassini project manager Earl Mays. Here's the audio from Cassini's dive, and notice the lack of pops and cracks which indicate dust particles hitting Cassini's radio and plasma wave science instrument. For comparison, now listen to the converted audio when Cassini crossed through the ring plane just outside of Saturn's main rings on December 18th, 2016. Notice the difference? Here's the audio file from Cassini's April dive again for comparison. NASA plans to study why the dust level was much lower than expected in the gap between Saturn and its rings.
Yeah, and with Cassini, they've found celestial objects in orbit around Jupiter that have liquid water.
Whoa.
Oh. Yeah, which is, it means nothing because that far away from the sun, you lack the solar energy for anything, at least biologically Earth-like to grow.
Mm-hmm.
But liquid water, which
That's
is
so cool.
huge. You need that for life, and it's got it.
There's one planet that might have liquid water underneath, though, and that's
Mars.
Oh no! It's one of Saturn's moons, and it's small enough and close.
Io.
Yeah, it's small
It's
enough.
a Jupiter moon.
Yeah, I think so. It's small enough and close enough to the planet that the tidal forces of the planet
Generate energy.
Yeah, and it might be warm enough to support life, which is cool.
Yeah, it is super cool.
We just need a big ass drill to drill through 10 miles of ice. That's all. Then we're good.
All set.
Like 80 million miles from home. Easy.
Okay, so the next probe of note is the Parker Solar Probe. It's going to probe the sun.
Ooh.
It launched October of 2018.
I hear that's the hottest one in the solar system.
It is the hottest.
Oh.
Yeah, well, Richard Bigley's in studio, but it's currently en route to the sun. It's going to do a flyby approach a couple of times, get into orbit around the sun, do an elliptical orbit, just sort of skimming the corona as it goes around. The corona is the atmosphere of the sun, essentially. And it's what causes solar flares. There's something called coronal mass ejections, or CMEs, which is like a chunk of the corona that breaks loose and starts traveling around. And when one of those things breaks loose and starts heading to Earth, we get solar flares and our communication satellites get all fucked up, and there's electromagnetic radiation that fucks everything. So we really should be a lot more concerned about coronal mass ejections than we actually are. Right now we don't talk about them, mostly because there's nothing we could do about them.
And we learn about them about 3 weeks after they happen, after they've hit us.
Yeah, the solution is to start burying all of our wired infrastructure underground, deep underground, where the CME can't get to it.
Oh, yeah.
But all the above ground, like transformers, every satellite in orbit, like those all get super fucked. The space station will be fucked.
There's an episode that I've been doing some pre-research for that's going to talk about like cosmic accidents that have happened, and one of them was in the late 1800s. A coronal mass ejection fried all the telegram lines in the world, and they all had to be replaced, and the world was kind of cast into like a communication darkness. Like, we have way more stuff on the lines now.
And
like,
none of it's
it
protected.
Yeah.
Everything is vulnerable.
Frightening.
Yeah, it is.
My Netflix.
I was going to say, could you imagine all those people that are addicted to their phones, like me included? What are we going to do? What are we going to do with our lives? We're
Chronic
gonna have
masturbation.
To go outside.
I can't get anywhere with Google Maps
I'm not
anymore.
supposed to masturbate outside anymore.
You can do it in your private property if nobody's watching. And if they are, that's their problem.
Yep.
So the
You
next,
know that from experience, I guess?
I had a high fence, Janet. You should have known.
I had sex in my backyard once, but because I'm square, I phoned the police ahead of time to make sure it was legal. And they said, as long as your genitals aren't exposed to your neighbors or anything, go for it. So we could be hanging halfway out of a sleeping bag, and it's still legal. And I said, what about the noise? And she said, well, as long as you're not like disturbing the peace, you can make whatever noises you want. And I'm like, okay, great. So I'm going to have some screaming sex in my backyard with my body half out of the sleeping bag.
Yeah, and it's very convenient that sex happens to hide your genital. I mean, it's
no, and I'd like to say I did it, but I couldn't get it up because I was too nervous about getting caught.
I just should have jumped out of a bush and spooked you.
Surprise!
Okay, so the next group of space probes are the Martian probes.
Yes.
Ooh. Of course, the previous two sets of probes were Mercury and Venus.
Those are cool too.
So the first Mars probe of note is called Mars 1. It was launched by the USSR on the 19th of June, 1963, and it attempted to do a flyby of Mars, but they lost contact with it en route, and they think it got within 200,000 kilometers of it, but they never found it. So it's gone. It's gone.
Yeah.
So they can say it got as close as they wanted. Nobody knows for sure.
Nobody knows, and it didn't send anything back, so it was of absolutely no use.
Oh boy, that's the beginning of a sci-fi movie.
Yeah.
The evil satellite comes back.
Then on the 15th of July, 1965, Mariner 4 was launched by the United States. It also did a flyby of Mars, which was successful, and it got the first close-up images of Mars, the ones that saw Olympus Mons and the Mariner Valley and that face that kind of looked vaguely alien that we weren't sure.
And started 1,000 conspiracy theories until we got a clearer picture. And It didn't really look like a face anymore.
Yeah, that was Mariner 4. That was her job.
Oh, goody.
She confused all of us for years.
Oh, yeah. It got a lot of people talking.
Yep.
Women are the best at that.
Yeah.
Sweet.
They are. Clearing things up.
On the 14th of November, 1971, the United States sent Mariner 9. And it was the first spacecraft to orbit another planet successfully.
Whoa.
So that was a big thing. Some of its instruments didn't work, so it didn't send a whole lot of data back, but I'll be goddamned it's in orbit.
Yeah.
And is still in orbit to this day.
There you
Just
go.
tootling around up there.
Yeah. There was a satellite, Explorer 1. Explorer 1 was the first United States satellite. It's still in orbit also. It went up in the late 1950s, and it's still there.
That's so cool.
I know there's something in NASA called modulator labs, and that's because they have labs that have preserved old technology, and they try and keep it in tip-top shape in a perfect environment because they need it to communicate with those old-ass satellites.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Next Mars probe of note is the Mars 3 lander. It was the first soft landing on Mars, but unfortunately it lost contact 110 seconds after the landing. Although before it did that, it sent back the first picture from the surface of Mars, which was very blurry, covered in dust, and you really didn't know what it was. But I'll be damned, it did it.
Oh, man. From the surface, you say?
From the surface, yes.
I mean, fuck it. Like, even if it's just like a blurry whatever, like, that's the first picture, you know?
Yeah, and I mean, there was a Mars 2 lander that slammed into Mars. It didn't slow down before it got there. That's a key part, slowing down.
He was just really excited to
He's
get
super
there.
fucking excited. Bam!
I'm going to predict, like, when we get there, somebody's going to make that into a research project. They're going to know how big and how heavy it was, and they're going to be able to predict some kind of density, soil, whatever bullshit.
Yeah, and then after the Mars 3 lander, the Soviet Union put up Mars 4, 5, and 6. One of them was a success as an orbiter. Two of them crashed, and they didn't send back much useful data. Or so they say. The next successful flights to Mars were the Viking 1 orbiter, which went into orbit around Mars for a little bit and then zipped off to go elsewhere. The Viking 1 lander, which was also a success, sent back some good pictures. The Viking 2 orbiter and the Viking 2 lander, which also did the same thing. They were very successful.
Sweet.
Yeah.
Viking was the first spacecraft to reach the surface of Mars and be an operational spacecraft. And the key challenge, and the reason everyone failed before Viking, is called entry, descent, and landing. The spacecraft enters the atmosphere of Mars about 100 miles above the surface, traveling at about 18,000 miles per hour. 7 minutes later, it has to be traveling at 1 or 2 miles an hour to make a soft landing on the surface and not collide and crash to the surface. Viking technology was that as you enter the atmosphere and get into the middle atmosphere, a supersonic parachute opens up and it slows it down. And you lose about 90% of your velocity, but you're still going too fast for a soft landing.
So what do? Well, they let the parachute do its job and descend toward the ground. Even they were going very, very fast. Once they got to about a mile or so above the ground, their lander, which had a local short-range radar, decided, hey, it's time to separate. So it fell away from the back shell and the parachute that was suspending it above, and it fell away, and then they lit their rockets just a short kilometer or two above the surface of Mars. They used throttle engines. Other than landing on the moon, there are very few propulsion systems work with throttle engines. So they were really ahead of the game. So they lowered the vehicle down with the propulsion system until they came to a landing about 2.5 meters per second impact with Mars with a 3-legged, compressive-legged lander. And they did that successfully, not once, but twice.
Fantastic. 16 kilobits confirmed.
And Viking perfected the technology to do it successfully. And every Mars lander, every Mars rover, every Mars probe to successfully land since then has used Viking technology.
Touchdown confirmed. Receive on Mars.
Then skipping ahead to like 1997, Mars Pathfinder, which was a lander, and of course it got our first rover Sojourner on Mars. Now flashback to the Mars rovers episode I did. Listen to that shit now. Yeah.
That's a flashback sound. Fuck it.
Yeah. So anyway, Sojourner was the first rover on Mars. Next was the Mars Global Surveyor, which was sent up in the United States in 1997 as an orbiter, and it had success. And its job was to do some mapping and look at what might be hiding underneath the surface of Mars, using infrared and radar.
That's interesting. So looking up for heat signatures and all that good stuff. Interesting.
Yeah. The next one was a Mars Climate Orbiter, and this one failed, unfortunately. It didn't make orbital insertion and just flew on by.
Orbital insertion.
You know,
it was busy.
Despite the failures, I'm surprised that so few of them have failed.
Right?
Well, a lot of them have failed. I'm excluding a lot of the failures.
Yeah?
Yeah, some of the early ones are pretty well, the majority are failures.
Oh, geez.
Wait till we get into the solar orbits.
Oh, geez.
There's a lot of shit that didn't work very well. Actually, Mars had a ton of failure. The Mars Polar Lander, I think it was the Mars Polar Lander, they fucked up the metric conversions, and it went the wrong way.
Oh no!
Oh no!
Yeah, someone's measuring in metric, someone in imperial, and they plugged all the values in the computer, and it just sent it in the complete wrong direction.
I mean, that's America's fault, right?
That is America's fault. Yes, because
this alone is why everybody should use the same type of measurement systems.
Yes.
I'll switch to metric.
I know. I can just hear them now. I don't want to be however many kilograms.
But kilograms is less than pounds. So
I know.
if you want to talk about losing weight, just switch your measurement system.
I'm up for
You've
that.
automatically lost weight.
Life hack.
Then
Self-care.
In 2003, Japan became the first non-US, non-USSR nation to set up a probe, and it failed. It failed to attain Mars orbit and just became a flyby.
Cool.
Sent back some stuff, but goodbye.
Oh.
Unfortunately.
It'll probe something else eventually.
The next two...
Live on to probe another day.
Sage is just going to lose her shit.
I know, I'm just dying here. I'm
when
so
we
old.
get to probe Uranus,
I know
it'll
it's going to
be
be bad.
Oh no.
I apologize in advance.
Okay, so the next two missions, which flew in 2004, were the Spirit and Opportunity landers.
Oh, yes.
Yeah,
I remember them.
Little Oppie.
I love Oppie.
Oppie, who's still cruising around, doing his thing. Those missions were successful.
And adorable.
Oh, by the way, I found a sound clip of the actual birthday song it plays to itself.
Nice.
Yeah.
Oh, yay.
Yeah.
Anyway, Spirit got stuck in May 2009, and so it's been operating as just a static science station until it lost contact completely in 2010.
I think they labeled it that to make it feel better.
Maybe, but Oppie is still cruising.
Oh, yeah.
The next one that's important is Rosetta. We all know Rosetta. Richard Bigley knows Rosetta.
Yes.
I know it's a big stone. Also, a language learning program.
Okay, Rosetta was a spacecraft that was on its way to go land on a comet.
Yeah.
Which it did. And I included it in the Mars probes because it used Mars as its slingshot to get out to the comet, which was in the Kuiper Belt.
Yeah.
Just beyond the
Was that
orbit of-
that recent one?
Yeah.
Yeah? The
No,
one
that was New Horizons.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, that's coming up.
Sorry. I got excited.
My bad. So after Rosetta was Phoenix, which launched in 2008. It was the first craft to actually do collection of samples from another planet.
Cool.
Oh.
Yeah, so it collected soil samples near the northern pole, looking for water and investigating Mars's geological history and biological potential, which is the exciting bit. Then the Dawn space probe, which is also really cool. I included it in the Mars pile because it did a Mars flyby slingshot, it used gravity assist en route to Ceres, which is a dwarf planet that exists between the orbits of Mars and Jupiter in the asteroid belt. And interestingly, Ceres contains exactly 1/3 of the entire mass of the asteroid belt.
Oh yeah.
Holy
So
smokes.
she's small, but she's mighty.
And it's like an asteroid that collected just enough to like form itself into a ball.
Yeah, she's just barely got enough gravity to stay spherical.
Yeah.
Cool.
Just a baby.
Yeah. But they found some ice water sticking to her. She's got some shiny bits that we've determined.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a good medium for passing on amino acids and doing some breeding and all that shit.
Yeah,
It's
and
valuable stuff.
And Dawn went into orbit around Ceres and took some amazing pictures of it. So we've got it mapped entirely in 3D.
Yeah.
It's super cool. In 2012, Curiosity went to Mars.
yes.
Little Curio. Little Curio. Oppie and Curio.
Oppie and Curio.
Little Curio went to Mars for an investigation of the past and present habitability of Mars and learning more about its climate and geology, and even doing some thoughts about how we might be able to terraform Mars in the future.
Ooh.
So cool.
Super cool.
I was actually talking about this with Mr. Sage Murray the other day about like it could happen like in our kid's lifetime. Like he's 4 now. He could potentially end up living on Mars.
And that's with today's technology. Like, that's saying, like, with today's technology, we can do it in this many years. Like, if we have advancements, that could shorten.
Well, even if you think about, like, the advancements in technology in the last 10 years.
Yeah.
Like, think about the iPhone that everybody had 10 years ago.
Yeah.
So, like, at that level of advancement, if we expedite it as much as it has in the last 25 years, it could be a lot closer than we think it is.
Yeah. Like maybe my whole
we
family
may
could
still be
go.
alive.
See, that feeds the optimist in me, because I'm often diving into the pessimism these days, so that's nice. I
Good.
like that.
I should mention that the Dawn probe that made it to Ceres is the first spacecraft to orbit 2 different celestial bodies.
How do I spell Ceres?
CERES.
CERES. Okay.
Yeah. Next,
Morning sex could also be just called Dawn probe.
Yeah.
so next are the asteroid probes. Galileo, which has done successful flybys of a couple of different asteroids, including one close as 1,900 kilometers, and the discovery of the first asteroid satellite, which is an asteroid orbiting another asteroid called Dactyl.
Dactyl.
Cool.
I like
I just
that.
think of dinosaurs.
Yeah.
I did.
So next up is Cassini probe, which we talked about briefly before.
Yeah.
Launched in 2000, did a distant flyby of a couple of planets, and then made it to Saturn, where it's been in orbit ever since, and it's taking incredible photos and getting incredible data, and we love Cassini so much.
That's so cool.
And she is responsible for the pale blue dot photo.
Oh, yes. The one in Carl Sagan's quote, which you will hear him say himself right here.
That's here. That's home. That's us. On it, everyone you love, everyone you know, everyone you ever heard of, every human being who ever was, lived out their lives. The aggregate of our joy and suffering. Thousands of confident religions, ideologies, and economic doctrines. Every hunter and forager, every hero and coward, every creator and destroyer of civilization. Every king and peasant, every young couple in love, every mother and father, hopeful child, inventor and explorer, every teacher of morals, every corrupt politician, every superstar, every supreme leader, every saint and sinner in the history of our species lived there, on a mote of dust, suspended in a sunbeam. The Earth is a very small stage in a vast cosmic arena. Think of the rivers of blood spilled by all those generals and emperors, so that in glory and triumph they could become the momentary masters of a fraction of a dot. Think of the endless cruelties visited by the inhabitants of one corner of this pixel on the scarcely distinguishable inhabitants of some other corner. How frequent their misunderstandings, how eager they are to kill one another, how fervent their hatreds. Our posturings, our imagined self-importance, the delusion that we have some privileged position in the universe are challenged by this point of pale light. Our planet is a lonely speck in the great enveloping cosmic dark. In our obscurity, in all this vastness, there is no hint that help will come from elsewhere to save us from ourselves. The Earth is the only world known so far to harbor life. There is nowhere else, at least in the near future, to which our species could migrate. Visit? Yes. Settle? Not yet. Like it or not, for the moment, the Earth is where we make our stand. It has been said that astronomy is a humbling and character-building experience. There is perhaps no better demonstration of the folly of human conceits than this distant image. To me, it underscores our responsibility to deal more kindly with one another and to preserve and cherish the pale blue dot, the only home we've ever known.
I don't care. That's fuck it. That's public domain. I don't care.
Yeah, it's incredible. The photo is...
What's he going to do? Yell at us? He's dead.
Yeah.
It's a photo through the outer rings of Saturn, and in it is a single blue pixel. One pixel in the entire photo, and that's Earth. Super cool.
It's wild.
Yeah.
Next are the Rosetta missions, which are the first ones that were successfully launched by exclusively the European Union. So the European Space Agency launched them out of their launch pad in French Guiana in South America on their Ariane rockets.
Interesting.
Yeah. So they are both headed to the comet 67P Churyumov-Gerasimenko. I don't know what the fuck that is, but it's a comet, and Rosetta made it there.
Yeah.
Hooray!
You would hope to give a comet a proper name if you're going to launch things towards it.
Yeah. And the Dawn spacecraft, again, was the first spacecraft to orbit two different celestial bodies, and it's currently orbiting Ceres, where it plans to sit for a long time.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. Because as the asteroid belt revolves, Ceres is a very safe place to have a spacecraft orbiting because she kind of keeps everything away.
Yeah.
So she'll just keep orbiting along with the asteroid belt and take pictures as she goes by different nifty things.
She's like a tugboat.
Yes.
Going to keep it safe in the harbor.
Yeah, Ceres is pulling her along like a tugboat.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
So next up are the probes to Jupiter.
Okay.
Pioneer 10 and Pioneer 11 were the first two of them. Pioneer 10 was the first probe to cross the asteroid belt. It was the first Jupiter probe and was the first man-made object on an interstellar trajectory, which is now in the outer regions of the solar system, but it is no longer contactable, alas.
Oh, no.
Damn.
Batteries ran out or just don't have the technology anymore?
Yeah, the batteries ran out. Pioneer 11 was the same. It went on to visit Saturn and then fucked off and died. Voyager 1. This is really exciting, this Voyager mission.
Oh, yes.
It was launched on the 5th of March, 1979. It did a flyby of a couple of planets, went to visit Saturn, and then it fucked off. And really, really, really fucked off, and fucked it off, and fucked off, and fucked off. And I'll get to like a real quick chapter on where it fucked off too, because it's really exciting.
I'm up for that. Yeah.
Then Voyager 2 did the same thing, visited Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune, and then fucked off as well. Next probe that I consider to be important is the Galileo orbiter. It also flew by various of Jupiter's moons and was intentionally flown into Jupiter at the end of the mission to make a big crater so that they could put telescopes there and see what it looks like when something crashes into Jupiter.
Cool.
They had also done something like that with Jupiter many years ago. There was a comet called Schumacher-Levy 9.
Ooh, yes.
That broke up as it got closer to Jupiter. I hope it's Jupiter, not Saturn.
No, it's Jupiter.
It's Jupiter?
Yeah.
Okay, so it broke up as it got closer to Jupiter, and we had our telescopes pointing at it, and we were able to watch what happens when explosions happen on another planet as these chunks of the comet busted through the atmosphere and exploded.
Astronomers have witnessed 5 massive explosions on the planet Jupiter as fragments from the Shoemaker-Levy collided with the planet. Larger explosions are expected later this week.
They called it the biggest explosion in the solar system for hundreds of years. Half an hour after the first comet fragment went in, the impact was still visible. The cloud of debris spread out for thousands of miles and was over 1,000 miles high. The astronomers were jubilant.
We're going to see things and we're going to learn a lot. That's the good news tonight.
I think it was 12 kilometers wide, and basically Jupiter, with the tidal forces of its gravity, was ripping off like 1 kilometer square chunks of it and launching it into its atmosphere, and they were just exploding in the clouds. And
yeah, it was pretty cool.
Yeah.
Wild.
Imagine if we had like Hubble back then. Holy shit.
Holy shit, indeed.
Yeah.
New Horizons, which did gravity assist en route to Pluto, explored Pluto's moon Charon,
Mm-hmm.
and then also fucked off into interstellar space.
And it revealed that Pluto has a giant white patch on it shaped like a heart.
Yes.
Which is like the cutest thing ever.
Yeah, I'm going to personify the fuck out of that. Doesn't mean anything, but like, Pluto loves me.
So Saturn was explored by Pioneer 11, Voyager 1, and Voyager 2 at various times between 1979 and 1981.
Mm.
Of course, there was a Cassini probe, also went to Saturn. The Uranus probes.
There we go.
Voyager 2 went and took a peek.
Who wouldn't?
In 1986.
That was the year before I was born.
Then exploration of Neptune, Voyager 2 fucked around there and took a look after it had been at Jupiter, Saturn, and Uranus.
That's a
And
promiscuous probe.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then New Horizons in...
No shame.
New Horizons in 2015 flew by the Kuiper Belt Object 2014 MU69 on January 1st of 2019. Which hasn't happened yet, so it's going to be there. By the time we release this episode, it will have done that.
Oh, yes.
Cool.
And
Yeah.
we'll put out a little, I'll put in a news clip of whatever it is.
I don't know about all of you, but I'm really liking this 2019 thing so far.
It was a spectacular way to bring in the new year, as NASA scientists confirmed that the New Horizons spacecraft had successfully reached the farthest object ever explored, a small icy world called Ultima Thule. New Horizons arrived 3.5 years after it had flown past Pluto, and 13 years after the craft, the size of a minivan, first left Earth.
We have liftoff of NASA's New Horizons.
Ultima Thule is 1 billion miles farther than Pluto, located in what's called the Kuiper Belt, on the outer edge of our solar system. It's small, about 20 miles across, and as seen in the first rudimentary images, seems to be shaped like a bowling pin.
Now, the image that I'm about to show you is the best image of Ultima that we got pre-flyby, and it's okay to laugh, but it's better than the one we had yesterday. There it is. Meet Ultima.
We are definitely looking forward to getting down this science data so all of our scientists and the world can see what the outer solar system, the origins of our solar system, have to hold for us, what surprises.
And so that's everything up to Rosetta, which has done flybys of different asteroids and then was intentionally impacted into an asteroid at the end of its mission, again, so they could watch the explosion.
Oh, yeah.
It's like a firstborn. You just experiment on that thing, and then all the other kids after that are golden.
Yeah. You make your mistakes on the first one. That's why they're tougher.
Yeah, I'm the oldest of 3 girls, and my mom calls me the experiment child.
Oh, yeah. I'm the oldest of 4 children. I have 3 younger brothers. I was the experiment.
Yep.
So I wanted to talk briefly about the 5 probes that have left the solar system.
Yeah.
They're Pioneer 10, Pioneer 11, Voyager 1, Voyager 2, and New Horizons. So Pioneer 10 left Jupiter on December of 1973. Its mission was officially ended in 1997. It last made contact with the Earth on the 23rd of January 2003. It's now presumed dead, and there's no future contact attempts planned. Pioneer 11 left Saturn in 1979, lost contact with it in 1995. They don't know where the fuck it is, and they're not trying to find it. Voyager 1 left Saturn in November of 1980. It's still in regular contact and transmitting scientific data, and contact is hoped to be maintained until at least 2020.
Cool.
Right.
Voyager 2 left Neptune in August of 1989. It's also still in regular contact and transmitting, and the contact is hoped to be maintained again until 2020. Then the new guy on the block, New Horizons, left Pluto in 2015, did a flyby of the Kuiper Belt objects, I guess that's happening in 2 days from now on January 1st.
Oh, look at that.
When it will be 43.4 astronomical units from the sun.
Wow.
And of course, an astronomical unit is the distance between the Earth and the sun.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So way out there.
Way out there.
Like way out in the suburbs.
Yeah. Okay, so I wanted to talk
Martinsville.
Yeah.
what does it mean to leave the solar system?
Yeah.
And it's generally accepted that the wall of the solar system is something called the heliopause. Now, there's something around the Earth called the geopause. Geo means Earth, helio means sun.
Okay.
So the geopause is an area of gravitational pull around the Earth that extends beyond, obviously, the orbit of the moon that influences gravity around it.
Okay.
When you get to the heliopause, two things happen. One thing is that you're no longer subject to the sun's gravity. It's no longer trying to pull you back. And so they'll notice that as they break through the heliopause, they don't accelerate, but the energy pull on them is a lot less.
Oh.
Because the sun is so far away that it stops pulling them.
So it reduces drag.
Exactly. The other thing that happens when you hit the heliopause is that solar wind stops. Now, there's photons that are flowing out of the sun in all directions. They are what make comets blow tails behind them. They're what sends light to Earth and everywhere else in the solar system. And it blows just like a wind, like wind particles.
Cool.
When you get to the heliopause, those stop. And you start getting a change into cosmic background radiation instead of solar radiation.
Oh, wow.
And so as soon as you have that switch, when you're no longer being influenced by the sun, you're obviously outside the solar system. And when you start feeling that cosmic background radiation, which has been in the universe since the Big Bang, and it's everywhere, but not so much in solar systems because stars pull them in.
Yeah. The stars are yelling louder.
Exactly. So when it gets past the heliopause, it's now just subject to cosmic background radiation.
Neat.
So the heliosphere, which is this giant glob around the sun, its sphere of influence, is a vast bubble-like region of space which surrounds and is created by the sun. In plasma physics terms, this cavity is formed by the sun in the surrounding interstellar medium. So if you think of like the idea of a comet, where there's dirty trails hiding behind it, the sun does the same thing as it zips around the galaxy. It trails a bunch of shit behind it. So if you're in front of the sun, the heliosphere is a lot smaller than if you're behind the sun.
Okay.
Because it's a teardrop shape.
Yeah.
So the bubble of the heliosphere is continuously inflated by plasma originating from the sun. So that's what keeps the heliopause right where it is and keeps it from collapsing in on the sun.
Okay.
So this is the solar plasma that's permeating the galaxy. So radiation levels inside and outside the heliosphere differ. In particular, galactic comic rays are less abundant inside the heliosphere, which I had talked about. And so the planets inside, like Earth, are partially shielded from their impact. The word heliosphere is said to have been coined by a gentleman by the name of Alexander J. Dressler, who is credited with the first use of the scientific term in literature. So then flowing unimpeded through the solar system for billions of kilometers, like shit tons of fucking kilometers, whole bunches of them, the solar wind extends far beyond even the region of Pluto until it encounters what's called the termination shock, which is when you hit the heliopause. It's sort of like breaking through the sound barrier in an aircraft. It builds up, builds up, builds up, builds up, builds up, and then boom, you crash through it.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So it's like that brick wall in Spaceballs.
Exactly like that,
Oh,
yeah.
wow.
Yeah, Rick on Spaceballs.
There we go.
So it
Mel
encounters,
Brooks reference. Yeah.
encounters the termination shock where its motion slows abruptly due to the outside pressure of the interstellar medium, because the pressure of the universe outside the heliosphere is less than it is inside is more than it is inside the heliosphere.
Oh, wow.
So as soon as you break through the heliopause, the pressure of the universe pushing on you increases because you no longer have the sun pushing that matter away from you.
Interesting.
Makes sense.
Yeah, so beyond the shock lies the heliosheath, which is a broad transitional region between the inner heliosphere and the external environment, in which sits the heliopause. So the overall shape of the heliosphere resembles that of a comet, approximately spherical on one side, with a long trailing tail opposite, known as the heliotail. So the two Voyager spacecraft have explored the outer reaches of the heliosphere, passing through the termination shock and the heliosheath. NASA announced in 2013 that Voyager 1 had encountered the heliopause on August 25, 2012, when the spacecraft measured a sudden increase in plasma density of about 40 times. So it knew it was there when it got there. In 2018, NASA announced that Voyager 2 had transversed the heliopause on November 5th of that year. Now, because the heliopause marks the boundary between matter originating from the sun and matter originating from the rest of the galaxy, spacecraft such as the two Voyagers, which have departed the heliosphere, can now be said to have reached interstellar space.
Oh, yeah.
For Occultae Veritatis podcast, my name is Leon Filger, along with
Sage Murray.
Ood Gallifrey.
And in studio with us,
Kaylin.
And
Richard Bigley.
Good night.
Thank you. Bye. Love you.
Alrighty, episode 69, Space Probes. And yeah, we did that on purpose. You know, we came out on Friday the 13th in 2017, and we want to remain as edgy and cringy as possible throughout the podcast run. But to play us out this evening, we welcome LANDR, the artist LANDR, L-A-N-D-R, and their song Sometime. See you in the after show.
I just wanna feel kiss, wanna feel touch. Missing your fragrance, that's the shit I love. I just wanna spend some time with you. Wanna spend some time. I've been thinking about some kids, wanna get involved. Shine so bright, I can swear that you a star. I just wanna spend some time with you. Wanna spend some time. I just wanna feel your kiss, wanna feel your touch. Missing your fragrance, that's the shit I love. I just wanna spend some time with you. Wanna spend some time. I've been thinking about some kids, wanna get involved. Shine so bright, cause swear that you a star. I just wanna spend some time with you. Wanna spend some time. I just wanna spend some time. Like all day with you. Airplane mode, no interruptions from you. Take my time, taking off your Jimmy shoes. Sit back, relax, watch my eyes watching you. Snack, I be damn, she a whole plate of food. I won't eat till I'm full, while she down with some food. Less than the powder, she'll never pay me. Like a gay baby, I'm friends with her ladies. Can't take my eyes off her for too long. If I do, I feel wrong, just cause she that bomb. Can't be surprised if I do not call. Lady making babies till the early morning. I just wanna feel your kiss, wanna feel your touch. Missing your fragrance, that's the shit I love. I just wanna spend some time with you. Wanna spend some time. I've been thinking about some kids, wanna get involved. Shine so bright, I can swear that you a star. I just wanna spend some time with you. Wanna spend some time. I just wanna feel your kiss, wanna feel your touch. Missing your fragrance, that's the shit I love. I just wanna spend some time with you. Wanna spend some time. I've been thinking about some kids, wanna get involved. Shine so bright, cause swear that you a star. I just wanna spend some time with you. Wanna spend some time.
Hello, welcome to the after show. I'm Leon Filger.
Sage Murray.
Ooh, Gallifrey.
We've got some new patrons. So here they are.
Woohoo!
Stephen Skytower.
Thank you, Steven.
Yep, one of our token $1 patrons. Another one is Braden Foltz.
Thanks, Braden.
$1 patron.
Love you.
Kevin Larson, $1 patron.
Love you too, Kevin.
Kevin Jubinville, $1 patron.
Love you too, other Kevin.
Jubin.
Up to the $5 category, Adam Bush.
Ooh, love you, Adam.
And Lindsay.
Love you, Lindsay.
And in our 666 category, Amanda Hawkins.
I love you, Amanda.
Oh, yes.
And Sean Hombring.
Love you, Sean. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thanks.
We super duper appreciate it. Like, without the patrons, we would literally still just be drinking shitty fridge beer from my downstairs fridge.
Yeah, and like a lot of the equipment in the room that allows us to record easily.
Yeah.
Like came from directly the Patreon account.
Yeah.
And, you know, we're putting money back into the show and we're always improving and changing the studio and updating stuff. And
like we're currently recording single track. We would really love to get a setup where we could record individual voice tracks.
Yeah, that'd be nice.
So send us your money and that's what we'll do with it.
That way when I'm like losing my lungs, like coughing after a hard bong rip, like I'm not interrupting other people.
Yeah.
Yeah. We definitely, like, we don't take a salary. We put all the money back into the podcast, except for when Leon got his tattoo. We all donated to that.
Yeah. Alrighty. So with the after show, thank you for joining the Patreon. I'm Mood Gallifrey.
Sage Murray.
Leon Pilger.
Have a good night.
Love you. Bye.